So we're really excited to hear from Aaron. Aaron Hans is the tech lead with CA.gov. And for the past 5 months or 4 months or so has been working really hard on creating a responsive and accessible and fast COVID-19 response site, which is covid19.ca.gov. It's the resource for everyone to look up information related to our state's guidelines on COVID-19, cases across California, and just helping to answer a lot of FAQ on COVID-19. We're super excited to welcome Aaron. Aaron, did you want to share your screen, or do you want me to just
Sure.
kind of go through your slides?
I'll take over. Thank you. Really appreciate the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm a member of the Oakland Brigade. I've been a member for a couple of years. I really enjoy being part of Code for America. It's really rewarding to work on projects together and build things as volunteer. In my day job, I'm tech lead for CA.gov, and a recent project we've worked on is covid19.ca.gov. Now, I realize that I'm talking to a group of civic technologists, and you're all well aware of the importance of accessibility, and you make the effort to make sure that everything you build works for everyone. And, this is an example of a tweet of someone whose father is having a huge amount of difficulty using the internet, and it has a severe negative effect on him. So when you make the effort to make things accessible, it makes a difference. And I feel really privileged to be part of a team at CA.gov. It's called the Alpha Team, that really prioritizes these principles. And so it's human-centered design, iterating based on user feedback, focusing on accessibility, inclusivity, and performance and readability. This team was formed in December of last year, and through February, we worked on prototyping a lot of new services and iterating on things, focusing on performance and accessibility. We built like a food bank finder, ways to check your tap water, find out how many carcinogens you have. And because we were successful in that work, we're tasked with building the covid19.ca.gov site in March. And we started this work a few days before the stay-home order. So we had to launch it in 4 days. And you can see in the top left, one of our initial versions. And the pandemic is still raging, so we're still iterating. And we've had thousands of commits on the repo since then. A lot of those are from the WordPress API because we feed that through GitHub. When we launched, we had an immediate traffic spike because the stay-home order was announced and people needed information immediately. That was a unique event in California. And since then, we've had tons of traffic spikes. A lot of people need information about how to stay safe and whether their businesses can stay open or not. What we've done successfully is make it fast, make it easy to comprehend, and it's fully accessible. So we have perfect lighthouse scores. It loads in 2 seconds, even on a low bandwidth connection with a device with a less capable CPU. And it has a really friendly automated readability index score. This wasn't there when we launched, but it's translated by humans into 7 languages, and all of our work is completely open source. That's the link to the repo for the site, and our APIs are open source as well. One of the main things that got us through that surprise traffic spike initially is using a static site generator. And there's a lot of these, and they're all beneficial in very similar ways. We chose 11, we're really happy with it. Just some of the major benefits of static site generation are that you don't have to have servers in your production pipeline. You're able to put your code into blob storage or some kind of S3 plus CloudFront situation. We're running on Azure. So it's just blob storage in front of CDNs. And this is going to save you money on your cloud costs, but the real savings are in terms of personnel and lack of downtime and just lack of complexity, because you're not dealing with a whole bunch of infrastructure in order to serve your production site. You can scale up easily and reliably. And you're not making any sacrifices. The way we set up COVID-19.ca.gov is that the writers are using WordPress as an authoring tool, and we're consuming the content headlessly through the WordPress API. So the writers can use a familiar, really top shelf authoring platform with all the bells and whistles they're used to, but we can still regenerate the entire site on every content change very quickly. And in terms of like front-end interactivity, we're building all of that with web components, which if we need real-time data, are making calls to our APIs, running on function as a service. The static site generator we chose, 11D, has an amazing community that's also focused on accessibility and performance. If you build a site with 11D, you can do a little tiny pull request to be included in their leaderboard, and you can jockey for position and try to make it to the top. But the competition is tough. It's really a pleasure to like be part of a community that's focusing on making sure everything's fast for everyone. Now, like, what's the big deal about performance, right? Like, we understand accessibility, someone can't use the site, but who cares about performance? It works great on my machine. Performance is an equity issue, right? You're deciding how many bytes go on the wire and someone has to pay for those. And one of the biggest differences is devices with less capable CPUs. One of the things we do on the Alpha team is we purchased a $20 cell phone from Widget Wireless. We go down there and say, what's the cheapest phone you can get? And it's running Android 9. It's a highly capable device. It can do anything you need it to do, but it's just way slower when you're feeding it a ton of JavaScript. So when you're serving users like that, they're just looking at a white screen for way longer than someone on an iPhone. And bandwidth is not evenly distributed. There's still a lot of Californians on 3G networks. And then even if you're a highly privileged person, you are sometimes in situations where you have low bandwidth. My data plan gets throttled if I use tons, or I used to commute on BART and there's little pockets of low bandwidth all over the Bay Area. So you're serving everyone if you're taking care of performance. And then the bottom line, like the biggest point is that speed is a search ranking factor on Google. So make it faster, rank higher, win. And before that was true, there was a ton of studies about how speed increases user satisfaction, impacts conversion levels. And this is common sense, right? If something's faster, you're getting things done quickly. It's just a more pleasurable experience, but there's a ton of studies that have been shown to back up this with real data. And those are linked at the bottom of the slide. And so like, how do you make sure that things stay performant? Because there's things that are trying to make it slower. The most important thing is to just make sure that these are part of your standard processes. And you're gonna have to make a compromise at some point. You have to ship something tomorrow. You don't have time to make it as fast as it should be. But when that happens, treat that situation as a bug and go back and fix it. And one of the great tools is Lighthouse, right? You're looking at a number. You can put some points up. You can challenge your coworkers to put some points up. Like, let's get that score higher. It's giving you recommendations. You can make those changes and you can bump that score up. That's fun. And the things that we do are we run audits on code changes. You can set performance budgets. Webpack comes with performance budgets. And one of the things that we're doing that's really helpful is running audits against production regularly. And you may not think that that's going to catch anything since you're also like looking at everything on code change, but you can catch weird little fluctuations. Like, do you have your CDN timeouts at the most optimal setting or something? And then when you're running these audits regularly, you can review the graphs over time and see when there's issues or what the trends are. So here's a link to some of the tools that we use to do those things, calibrapp.com. That's a subscription service, and it'll run Lighthouse against your servers, and then it'll also accept pings about when your code changes. Speedify is really interesting. It's kind of a roll your own solution that does something similar. And then you can also just use Lighthouse directly and kind of build your own tools from scratch. That's a lot of fun. Like, this is true. There really is a conspiracy to make your site slow. There's a lot of forces at work that are trying to slow things down, like just general development processes where there's a constant need for more features. Or like, it's so appealing to be able to monitor people. And like, you can install these massive client-side libraries that can watch everyone's cursor and keystroke, and you can recreate a whole video of their session, but there's a cost to these tools. And so when teams who are trying to increase conversion levels are doing something that impacts performance negatively, you want to make sure everyone's aware of the trade-offs. Like, tons of libraries that you read about have just kind of basic instructions, like put this script in the head where it becomes render blocking, and sort of should be second nature to kind of know if that's really necessary or not. And then, like, I'm part of the problem. I'm a developer. I'm enamored with these tools. I'm always like suggesting, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we had 3D visualization on a map? And my boss is like, oh man, get with that stuff. Give me a break, right? But I'm not trying to say don't do cool things, right? Just cover the basics first. Make sure that everyone's aware of where we are in terms of performance, accessibility, and readability. And then let's do the cool things. So readability is the grade level measurement of how hard it is to comprehend the text on your page. And so if you have a lower grade level, that reduces the cognitive load, and your users don't have to concentrate as hard to get through whatever process you're trying to lead them through. And this is inclusive because you don't require, you know, a high level of education to complete the process. Some good tools that our writing team uses are hemingwayapp.com. This is fun because it gives you real-time hints. And it's a web app. You can put your text in there, you can start changing it, and you can watch the grade level go up and down right away. And then if you're building something yourself, some packages I've used successfully are Unfluff, which is a way to extract the body of a web page. This used to be something you had to pay tons of money to Diffbot to do, but Unfluff is, you know, free open source package that does that really nicely. And then Readability Scores applies the automated readability index algorithm to any string. So it'll give you a score. And so this is not something that we've released publicly, but I'd be interested in feedback on this tool. We recently built a leaderboard that ranks all the like 200 odd sites that are under something.ca.gov. And it ranks them based on accessibility, performance, and readability. And government sites usually do much better on accessibility because they're trying to follow this legal mandate. But, you know, they kind of are all over the board on performance. Accessibility isn't perfect, and readability also varies wildly. And if you can get these scores up, it makes things easier for users. And so the thought is that this is a tool that's going to motivate government sites to kind of pay attention to these metrics and help serve California residents better. And I'm really happy to be part of the team at ci.gov. And if you want to help us out, we're hiring. There's some links here, news.alpha.ca.gov/roles, and that links to, you know, a more comprehensive hiring page as well. Thank you. It's really been a pleasure sharing this information with you. And there's kind of a more comprehensive write-up on our blog linked in the slides, which we'll share later. Thanks.
Thank you, Aaron. That was really awesome overview. Do we have any questions?
I have a question. Alan, this is Dean. I'm visually impaired. How do you test the performance against some tools? Because when this happened to me before, I was using Zoom with one of my accessibility tool. The accessibility tool was taking a lot of memory, so I canceled it and I use another tool which which uses less performance memory, and it works. How did you guys test performance using different tools, accessibility tools?
Yeah, the first tool that we reach for is the Lighthouse Accessibility Audit. And that's built into your browser, and that's going to run the basic accessibility checking for like, do you have enough color contrast, and are you using alt text, and does it look like from the code, are things keyboard navigable? And Axe is a great tool too. And you can go to web.dev/measure to run Lighthouse if you wanted to run it directly from a website without using your own browser tools. But none of these tools are perfect. Like, it's really helpful to try to keyboard navigate through something and make sure that everything's working the way you expect it to, or to try using a screen reader. And I'm really impressed by people who are proficient using screen readers. It's amazing how they can move through web pages.
Well, I use WebAIM. There's another tool called WebAIM, but yeah, all of the people who use accessibility in the real world, they use that one. I know the Lighthouse one too because I'm part of the Lighthouse. So yeah, I'm just curious because sometimes it bombs. Like I use some screen reader and it was hogging up so much memory because you talked all about performance issues. So I'm just kind of curious.
Yeah, WebAIM is great. Thank you.
Rob, you said you had a question?
Hi, I just have a quick question, and thank you for being here to answer questions. It's not related to what you've talked about yet, but I'm a volunteer contact tracer with Santa Clara County, and we're using CalConnect and Salesforce as the back end. And I'm not a coder necessarily, but as a pretty good computer user, it's been very frustrating. And so does your team have any control or influence over what they're doing with CalConnect for contact tracing?
Yeah, I'm not personally in charge of that, but I can, raise that issue and we can see if we can help you out.
Only in that it's not personally, it's just as a system. It's things like going between the first name and last name tab requires going through another tab for like the county that you're in. And it's just usability aspects like that really slow you down when you're with a person that's got COVID-19 that you're trying to, tell to isolate in place, and you're having a frustrating experience with your computer. So yeah, I would just add that would be awesome to have your help there.
That's great feedback. Thank you. I'm going to pass that along.
Thank you. I think Annie has a question as well.
Hey, this is Annie. I'm one of the co-captains at Code for San Jose. So I was curious if you could speak more about how you set up the WordPress API so you could gather all of the copy content and then automatically upload it into your site. We run into a lot of issues where we have external partners who have copy that they want us to add, and it's hard for us to maintain it over time.
Okay. So when we installed WordPress on a new server, the API is enabled. And then we set, there's this ping URL that WordPress uses. It used to be kind of for I don't know, like RSS readers or something that it could ping with updates. But we put our publishing API endpoint in the WordPress ping config. So then when there's a new post, WordPress itself pings our API and says there's a new post. And then our API that is there for the purpose of publishing requests the latest post from WordPress, and it's keeping track of what posts it's seen already and doing hashes of them to see if there's anything different. And then it takes anything new and commits it directly to GitHub. So we're using the GitHub API to publish into GitHub. And then we're using GitHub Actions to trigger builds on new code pushes. So someone's typing into WordPress, the WordPress pings our API. API retrieves the post body from WordPress, commits to GitHub, and then the GitHub action runs the 11e build.
Interesting. And so would they update like a paragraph, a particular paragraph, and you know exactly what copy they're updating? I guess I'm not sure how you know which part of the site to update.
Right. So we're retrieving the posts by most recently updated, and then we're just using like an MD5 hash. So we don't know exactly what they changed, but we do know there was some text change. And then we just overwrite the whole thing again.
Okay. Very cool. Thank you.
And that's open source too. Like, that is not code that we've had time to refine, but that is part of the GitHub repo under github.com/ca-gov.
Great.
Awesome. I also have a couple of questions. One of my questions was, who's responsible for kind of like maintaining this content? I imagine news about COVID-19 is changing all the time. Do you collaborate with other departments or agencies in the States for the content?
Yeah, it's kind of incredibly hectic because we work closely with California Department of Public Health, and subject matter experts are reviewing all the new advice that people need. Everything goes through the governor's office, and lawyers are approving things. We have a really crack content team. It's just a pleasure to work with them. They're so talented, and they're kind of taking this information from medical experts and trying to make it understandable and actionable for someone who doesn't have a lot of time and might be under stress. It's a difficult process, and we have like 5 people focusing on that full time.
That's awesome. And also, I was wondering, you mentioned about making it readable, making sure your content is easily understood across folks of all different backgrounds. And I'm just wondering, when you create like a government website and you have so much government jargon, policy sort of words, what is your strategy for making that more readable?
Yeah, it's an incredibly difficult process. And I'm not personally in charge of that, but I see the writers doing that, and I'm just consistently impressed with them. Like tools like Hemingway app, where you can just start messing with the text and seeing what it does, are really helpful. Making sentences shorter, of course, like trying to remove legalese, get to the point, try to not tell the reader anything that's not necessary for them to know, just removing filler, making things shorter. It's a difficult job. It's easier to write code.
Well, that's awesome. Thank you. Does anyone have any other questions?
Not a question, but a comment. This is Walter Youth. I'm sitting in from the Sacramento Brigade, and I work over at Caltrans on the data governance team. So thanks for presenting this. I was actually heard the presentation from CBT yesterday, kind of giving the overview. So it's good to kind of get a little bit more in depth with this. We heard the presentation from Angie and the Alpha team. So thank you.
Cool. Thank you.
Hey, this is Garrett here from the Code for San Jose. Just had a question with regards to kind of how that relationship is structured between you guys and the city of San Jose or the state of California that helps host that web page. Like, what are some like hurdles or roadblocks that you have to go through, or were they kind of really helpful in any of those regards?
That's a great question. Like the government's working with tons of groups, and there's all tons of kind of internal government teams, and it seems like one of the most difficult things is like trying to figure out there's no duplicate effort going on. So I'm a contractor directly for the state, and like most of the people on the team are employees of the state of California, and they've been kind of taken from other departments to help with this effort.
Thanks.
Any last questions? I have another question for you, Aaron. You mentioned web components is something that you used for COVID-19.ca.gov. I was wondering, did you build them from scratch? Did you use an open source library? What was your approach to using web components, and why did you think, like, what's the purpose of using it?
Thanks for asking that. I really love web components. I think it's so cool that the component model is baked into the browser now. Like when React introduced the component model to web development, it was really ground shaking. But now you don't need a lot of that overhead. You can, encapsulate your HTML, JavaScript, and CSS inside of web component. We're trying to be as lean as possible, so we're writing them from scratch right now. Like we have just like 4 or 5 components on NPM right now under the CA.gov user, like little stuff like autocomplete widget to help you find what county your zip code is in, and just stuff like that. But they're a lot of fun to write because you're dealing with a small amount of code and it's fully encapsulated, so it's safer, but there's not a lot of stuff to comprehend outside of it. So I get a huge kick personally out of working with web components, and I think they're really beneficial.
That's awesome. Sorry, who was speaking?
Oh, I was just going to piggyback off that question. So you're saying that a lot of the static code for the website is just in blob store like S3 or some type of storage like that. Is that where you're storing the components as well? Does that get like loaded onto the user's, I guess, mobile device or client side?
Yeah, so like all the client side code, HTML, JavaScript, and CSS is delivered to every single device. And so that's why we're so stingy with what we're sending over the wire.
Gotcha.
And using web components allows us to send a lot less code than we might if we were using bigger libraries.
Yeah, and then that also has communication back to an API, and those APIs are just servers in Azure, I assume?
Yeah, function as a service. I'm really digging that too, because with web components, you're getting encapsulation on the front end, and with function as a service, you're able to do encapsulation on the back end.
I see.
Also, go ahead.
Yeah, I was like, is that kind of like Lambda functions?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. Makes sense.
Totally the same thing. Yep. Azure just doesn't call them Lambda. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Who has the responsibility of the data? Is it still, I guess California still has the data, but is the data like administratively accessible directly to the database, or is there like another team that deals with that and there's some loopholes there?
Yeah, great question. So there's definitely a lot of other people involved, but there's a big effort to make sure that the data is available in a variety of different formats to people like you who want to do something with the data. And so like you can download a CSV, you can actually register for direct access to their database. You want to do something incredibly complex. And if you need some other type of data access, that can probably be arranged, because that team really wants, civic technologists to have access to this information for it to be open.
Are you guys using some kind of caching layer to help with performance, or is it just direct connection?
So we have kind of an Azure CDN enabled with a 10-minute cache time in production. And then when that's cold, it retrieves the HTML.
The data as well is stored in there? Or
the data is,
or is it cold
a ton
every
of
time?
data on the site. Like if you go to the homepage, it'll say, this is the number of cases and up to, yesterday. And so we're pulling that once a day. We have an API cron job running on a function as a service. And then that new JSON that we got from the database is committed to GitHub, and the static site regenerates.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, I've got a question. I'm curious what elements of the California COVID site have been most popular? Like, where have people gravitated towards? What has been their interest in trying to figure out information that the state is putting out? And how has that affected your guys' decision making on the team?
Yeah, you see a lot of interest initially with the stay home order description itself, like what does that mean? The symptoms and risks page, like, you know, what are the symptoms and what are the risks? And then in terms of like, recently it's been what businesses are allowed to be open and closed. Like, I'm running a nail salon, you know, what am I allowed to, you know, be in business right now? Is it safe? And, you know, there was a ton of people who wanted to get haircuts, and, you know, we get like a lot of interest for people like, can I get a tattoo right now? You know, like people need to know these things. If you look at the site, you can see the kind of most popular searches that have been occurring on our search page.
In that same vein, how are you guys pulling and storing that data? Is it just like Prometheus, or are you using some other NPM library to aggregate the data? And
Like for the search index?
yeah, so I mean, you're, for example, oh, I guess, yeah, I guess the search index would be one.
Yeah, we're using kind of like a grandfathered in Google search widget. Like, I think that they've changed the way this works, but the state still has a license for it. And so it's kind of like this little thing you can plug in, and it's hitting the Google index, but, you know, with the restriction to search only your site.
We've got one more question from Rob.
Yeah, just real quick, you know, the stay-at-home orders are very much the same, but they're also different. And is there a way that you guys can highlight the differences between new orders, I guess, so that it's more readily accessible to the user of what's changed, so you don't have to go over the same information again?
Yeah, like that's tough. One aspect of it is like what's open. Like, is the zoo open in my county or not?
Right.
And we're working on something that we're trying to keep up to date that kind of keeps track of the state guidance, because it's different for every single county now and for every type of business. And so you can kind of type in nail salon or Alameda County, and they'll tell you, you know, that that's not allowed to happen in indoors in Alameda County right now. You know, like schools are a huge topic right now. Like, your county's not allowed to have in-person instruction if it's on the monitoring list recently. And so, yeah, people need that information and prepare.
The minutia has to be tough to push to the correct users. I can only imagine your difficulty, but thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, feel free to reach out. I'm gonna tell people about contact tracing issues and see if we can do something to make that better.
Yeah, thank you very much. We've got our help desk, and they are okay and good, but your team sounds fantastic, so that's great.
Thank you.
We have time for one more question, maybe from someone who hasn't asked a question or shared a comment yet. Alrighty, it looks like we might be wrapping up this discussion. Thank you so much, Aaron, for sharing that presentation with us and answering all of our questions about your COVID-19 response site. If volunteers are interested in getting involved, are you looking for any like open source contributors?
We would totally welcome any kind of open source contribution. You can look at all our code, you can make a PR, you can, you know, open an issue and say, hey, wouldn't it be cool if this was different, without writing any code? So we'd love to hear from you.
Great, thank you so much.